Hi and welcome back to another lesson. Today we're going to take a look at gospel piano, specifically some tips and tricks to get you started on the genre. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to first of all play a little piece, and then we're going to break it down and I'll point out the tips and tricks and also how they work in context. So let's get started. Alright, let's go over what I just played and I'll point out some stuff that I think might be useful to you. Let's start with tip number one. Tip number one is you're going to be playing a lot of triads. Triads are basic chords that have three notes. Let's say an F major triad, which has the notes F, A, and C, or maybe, let's say, a D minor triad, which has the notes D, F, and A. And the tip is, even when you're playing a triad, try to play it with at least 4 notes. And the way you do this is by doubling notes. So for example, here's my F major triad, and I can take this F here, and I can move it up an octave here. This would still be an F major triad, because it would still have the same notes, A, C, and F, but it would be an inversion of it. Similarly, I can take this F here and double it down here. Still an F major triad. But it has a fuller sound, and gospel piano is really about having a full sound. You know, this kind of massive block chord sound. So instead of playing, which is an F to a B flat major to an F major, try playing. It's exactly the same, but I've doubled the F down here for both chords. You know, here's my F major, so I'm doubling the F, and here's my B flat major, which also has an F in it, and I'm doubling the F down here. The second tip has to do again with getting a thicker sound, this time in the left hand. And it's trying or seeing if you can play not just the root note as a bass, which a lot of people do, but maybe even the fifth or even the third if possible. And I'll show you what I mean by this. Let's say you have again an F major triad in your right hand, and naturally what you do is you'd play the F note for your bass. Now, first of all, using tip number one, you're going to play an F triad like this with 4 notes, and then you would also consider playing the 5th degree or the 5th note of the F major scale, which is C here. And it's also one of the notes of the chord itself, so that's another hint. And again, if I'm going to play a B flat major, I'm not just going to play one bass note, I'm going to try and play 2 of them. You know, and you can also look at it this way, whereby the extra note is not a bass note, but it simply extends the chord in the right hand. Let's look at another tip, and I call this one the 4/5 sound. Let's say you have this F major scale, And the different notes in the scale are the degrees of the scale. They have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is 1 again, an F. And the 4/1 sound says the following: play the 5th degree for your bass, in this case C, but play in the right hand the chord built on the 4th degree, a B flat major actually. And you'll get this sound. And what's nice about this is that this chord leads fairly naturally into the root degree, which is an F major. Usually what you do is you'd play the 5th degree and go into the 1st degree. So you'd play a C going into an F, because the C is the 5th degree of the F major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the 4/5 sound is really a sort of a substitute for this, meaning that you can, whenever you want to resolve to the root, to F major, preceded by a 4/5. And again, remember, if you can double notes, do it. I'm doubling the F here, and I'm doubling the F here, and also adding this extra C in the bass. Let's look at another tip, and this tip has to do with what's called top pedal notes. So let's look at this progression of chords I played. And you can see that in all of the chords, what I was doing is I was stressing the fact that they all shared the top note, which is an F. So this chord is a G dominant 7. So I'm playing a G in the left hand and an F, B, D, and F in the right hand. Here's my 4/5 chord, a B flat over C. And this resolves to an F major chord. And they all have this F note, and I chose to play particular inversions of them that stress this out. All right, let's look at another tip. And this is something really, really basic, or really fundamental, I'd say, in the gospel piano sound. And this says the following. Suppose you have to go from one chord, let's say an F major, to a B flat major. Now, what you'd sometimes try to do is use passing chords or passing notes. So you wouldn't just play an F to a B flat major, but you'd maybe do something like this. So I'll show you what I played, and then we'll try to find some rules that will guide you when implementing this in other situations. So I played an F major to a C major, to an F major, to a B flat major, which is my destination. And note how in the left hand, the bass, my bass, actually climbed up. F to a G, to an A, to a B flat. Now, can you do this with other chords? First of all, if you learn to do this with just the 4 and with just the 1 and the 4, in this case, the F major and the B flat major, you'll really cover a lot of ground, because the 1 and the 4 are really, really basic kind of points or harmonic destinations in gospel piano. So if you can go from the 1 to the 4, maybe from the 4 to the 1, using passing notes, then you're really gonna you really have learned something useful. So what's the idea behind passing notes? First of all, you want to look for kind of a bass note that connects the two chords. For example, suppose I want to go from, let's say I want to go from the 5, which is a C, to the 1, which is an F. So what would I do in this case? So I want to go from a bass of a C to a bass of an F. And the natural thing, or the natural way to do this, would be to kind of go with all the notes in between. And now the next step is finding chords which fit to these bass notes. And your natural candidates would be the 1, the 4, and the 5. The F major, the B flat major, and the C major. So let's see. Start from the C major, and have the C note here. Next note is a D, and I know that the B flat major, the 4, has a D in its notes, right? I have a B flat, a D, and an F. Then the next note is an E, so and I know that the C major, the 5, has an E in its note. And finally, the F is my destination, so I'm going to play an F major in the right hand. So maybe I can find inversions of these chords. Something like this, that would lead me from my initial point, C major, to my final destination point, which is F major. And I just played one such option. So always try to come up with these passing chords or passing notes. Let's look at another tip. And this tip has to do with 6 chords. 6 chords are kind of neglected. Everybody likes to talk about triads or 7th chords and dominant chords and 13th chords. But 6 chords don't really get a lot of love, in my opinion, and that's kind of a shame because they have a really nice sound that really fits into gospel piano playing. So what I mean by these, let's take the G major scale. Now, when you want to build a G major chord, you're going to play the 1, 3, and 5 degrees of the scale, a G, a B, and a D. When you add the 6th degree, in this case an E, you get a G6 chord. Now, you can usually omit the 5, which is a D, and play a G for the bass note. And this is kind of a G6 sound. And this would fit, where would this fit? Well, let me play a progression for you. So I was playing here a G6 chord. So I took this G and I doubled this G6 and I doubled this G up here. And then I played the 4/5 and went to the root. So it's kind of a really nice sound. I personally really like it. Something to think about when you're building your chord progressions. Try playing around with 6 chords and see if they fit. Not always, but sometimes they will. Let's look at another tip. And this tip has to do with playing grace notes. And actually I have a video on my channel about playing grace notes, but let's cover the basic idea here. The basic idea is that suppose you have a lick like this. Maybe this is your melody. To make it sound kind of more bluesy or more gospel-y, what you can do is you can precede it with either the note that is semitone below it, or maybe 2 notes that are, 2 semitones below it. So the way I'm playing this is I'm hitting the C with my thumb, and then I'm kind of gliding from the D flat to the D. now take a look at what I did afterwards. You see here, I used another grace note, where I hit the D flat and immediately switched to the D. And look at how I also use this in my left hand. So when I played my G7 to the 4/5 to the 1, I basically slid into the G, then slid into the C bass note, and then slid into the F bass note. Don't overuse it, but it's a really, really powerful tool to have under your belt. So it's good to practice it and see if you can, whenever you play something, ask yourself, can I stick in some grace notes here? That's it. These were a couple of tips to get you started on gospel piano. I hope you've enjoyed the video and it gave you some ideas and that you've learned something interesting, and I'll see you next time.